Let's talk about the most broken augment in the game. And I'm talking about Fine Vintage. It has the fourth best win rate in the game, but that's behind two Fortune augments and Golden Egg. So you can arguably say that this is, for all intents and purposes, the best augment in the game right now. Riot almost certainly should nerf this augment. And it has a 4.04 average placement at 2-1. So it's possibly the best augment in the game early on to take. And we're going to talk about where I heard this through Clement Chu. It was actually YDY1 that started playing this. And the general idea behind this is you're going to play the strongest board, probably not streak early, maybe lose streak so you can get some good econ. And you're transforming all your normal items into support items early on and creating a massive pinky front line that can then allow your backline to scale. So we're talking about Randuins, we're talking about Aegis, a needlessly big gem that allows you to scale your team's damage over time because your front line is so tanky. It also means items that scale like Guinsoo or Archangels are really good, as well as Kale, because a 3-star Kale can really scale attack speed over time. Frodan also recently talked about this, about the latest tech from China. And he basically talks about a lot of the same ideas with Heavenly Vintage. And the idea behind this is that your ZZ Rots, the Void Spawns, actually get their Heavenly bonus applied to them, plus all of the other support resistances like this that apply to your ZZ Rots. So let's say you have Void Spawn. All of them get that benefit and scale as the stages increase, this Void Spawns do. And so you're just creating this massively super tanky army that can just pummel over the opposing team. And when you dive into the data of Fine Vintage and look at the traits, you'll find that 7 Heavenly has a 50% win rate, and 7 Storyweaver is not far behind at 39%. And I'm going to show a game that I played recently where I actually played the Storyweaver variant and someone else in the same lobby played the Heavenly variant. And I've also tried the Heavenly variant, but this is a lot more volatile because it really requires you to make sure that you hit at least 2 ZZ routes early on. And if you commit too early to Heavenly and don't hit those ZZ routes, you can really get destroyed. Whereas Storyweaver is a lot lower variance because you don't have to rely on those ZZ routes as much. Of course, team-wide buffs like Altruist, where you also get the armor and magic resist, help your ZZ rots as well. And then Dragon Lord, 6 Heavenlies here. I think Sage is somewhere here. Yeah. So anything that boosts all of your void spawns from ZZ rot is going to be really good for this comp. And lastly, when we take a look at the items, this is kind of the order of preference. You want your Aegises and you want your ZZ rots and Randuin's Omen. So these 3 are kind of the core support items that you want to build your team around. And probably one needlessly big gem is pretty good. And if you're building Kale, you want to have anti-shred because you really don't want to be wasting an item slot on Obsidian Cleaver because you'd much rather have another Aegis or ZZ Rot. And so you really need shred in this comp. And you don't have anti-heal. So you want probably some backline anti-heal since this comp, this Fine Vintage comp really relies on a stall and scale up your backline over time. And so you just want to make sure that you're not letting the opposing team heal up over time. And then Guinsoo's Rageblade is really strong again because you have such a tanky front line. Just being able to scale up the fight allows you to win the battle. So now we're going to jump into a game. You want to look for Fine Vintage when it's a silver augment. It's particularly good when you land on the portal that lets you go silver, gold, prismatic. And of course, we have Fine Vintage here, and it's really good on portals where you have extra item components like I do here, because that just gives you an extra support item. And so in general, you want to angle either Heavenly or Storyweaver, as we talked about in the stats. Those are the best traits. You want to make your items and put them on the bench so that they can get started transforming into support items. And you do want to try to preserve as much HP as possible while still holding your Heavenly and Storyweaver units. And because I haven't gotten any ZZ rots yet. I am going to default to Story Weaver because I've played a game before with Fine Vintage, and you can see there that last guy also had Fine Vintage when I was scouting. But when I played Heavenly and I didn't get any ZZ rots, it felt really bad. And so it's kind of a lottery in the beginning, whether you or not you can get the ZZ rots. So I found that Story Weaver is just a much safer play. It won't cap out as high as Heavenly will, but it's still incredibly strong. You can see also that I built the green talisman for Pale. That's magic and armor shred. And when you are building Story Weaver, you eventually will get to Aurelia, which means you don't need that Sunder, but it's the magic shred is still extremely useful for Kale. You can see here that someone already called out in the chat that they're going ZZ Rot. The other guy's going Heavenly route. And Spat is incredibly useful for these fine vintage starts, whether you're going Story Weaver or Heavenly, because Heavenly allows you to get to 7 Heavenly with the cloak. And with Story Weaver, it just lets you get that 7 Story Weaver in a lot earlier. So we're looking for Aegis, we're looking for Randuins, we're looking for ZZ Rots. And here I got Randuin and I got a ZZ Rot. So we're going to go ahead and start using those. I didn't realize that the ZZ Rot won't spawn until before, if you put it on after the battle starts. I pick a Vest to try to get that Story Weaver back, but I do want to keep the Heavenly route open just in case. And here you actually want to, this redemption would have been really good with a Morello. I was a little bit dizzy, not sure what I was even looking for here. But when you're going down or even an IE, since you want to later itemize Aurelia, but this is actually arguably the worst thing I could have landed on since I already have Shred. But you can see that my team's still going to be incredibly strong once I get everything online, even though I basically somewhat down a Radiant Augment. Because you have so much frontline in this team, you either want a item, normal items or radiant items that will help your team scale. So whether that's Gwynsu, Archangel, you want anti-heal and just tank items, but you arguably don't need more tank items. Redemption would be great because you have so much armor, MR across your whole team. And you just want to, again, build all of these items to start converting them over to support items. I'm holding a bunch of Story Weavers. I can get 5 Story Weaver in pretty soon. And you can see that we're starting to build towards the endgame comp that we discussed. So most of the time when you're playing this comp, you're going to be lose streaking early. Since you won't be slamming your items, your board's going to be weaker as a result of that, which means you should probably be trying to econ up so that you can get to level 8, level 9, which allows you to cap out your board with whether it's Heavenly, hitting the Wukong, getting as many team slots available for as many Heavenly units as possible, or Story Weaver, again, letting you build towards getting your Aurelia in at level 8 and rolling or level 9. You'll find that this strategy is extremely stable if you can get your right pieces in place as far as the support items go at level 7 and 8, which lets you go fast 9 in a pretty straightforward way. So I find my first Aegis, and you want to just, again, try to move through stage 2, 3, 4 as cheaply as possible while holding the core units that you want and preserving as much HP as possible. The last augment I selected was Healing Orbs because a lot of the support items, they don't have healing attached to them. And again, given the amount of armor MR and attack speed that you're getting from Aegis, Randuins, you really benefit from having some type of healing on the team, which again would have been why that Radiant Redemption what might have been really good. So here I'm taking another Randuin's, and I have also a needlessly big gem, which gives your team more damage. Since you're so tanky, you will benefit from that. You basically lose damage. The reason you'll lose is because you don't have enough damage. And so this Kale is a great way to supplement with fine vintage because you don't need to itemize Kale, which means that you can have more support items, and Kale scales over time with her orange or red talisman, which is exactly what you're looking for when you build out these types of fine vintage boards because you're so tanky. So Kale is actually like the perfect fit with fine vintage aside from heavenly. So this is actually the heavenly guy who's playing fine vintage, and you see that he hit basically everything except for ZZ Rot. And so his team is pretty squishy. And even though has all the heavenly units, I'm able to pretty easily beat him. And we'll keep an eye on that matchup as time progresses. And here I'm just putting in the Story Weaver units to make it pretty easy for me to keep track of everything. And I get another ZZ Rot, which is great. It lets me get some super tanky units in. And you can see now my Kale will just have basically infinite time to scale up. The needlessly big gem, when it hits 0, amplifies my team's damage. I'm checking out this heavenly guy. He's at 6 heavenly, so he just needs Wukong to get to 7 heavenly, which is an incredibly big spike. The other thing that's really beneficial for this team is Altruist, because Altruist also gives your team armor MR and gives you some healing. So here I'm looking at Tiny but Deadly, just get more attack speed, which lets Kale scale up even sooner. So now I'm at 3-star Kale, 7 Story Weaver, and you'll see I just start dominating the lobby. And this is just an extremely cheap board. The only 2 stars I have are Alawi and Zyra. And look at this. I'm just walking over these lobbies, these matchups, even against meta comps. So you'll see this guy's building towards Bard, Tom Kench 3. We'll see how this does against some of these guys, but it's just incredibly strong. The other weird thing is that I noticed that these ZZ Rat Void spawns, every now and then they respawn and they don't maintain their formation. So you got to keep an eye on that. So this is a R2 with a Radiant Guinsu, fully itemized Top Kench 2. And it's not even close. I mean, that guy does have a golden egg on bench, but I was very surprised at how stable this was, and I could just really slowly level up. Now, I wanted that Aurelia, but Aurelia is just great. I think she had the single best stats as far as individual unit goes with Fine Vintage, because she just scales really well, does damage to the weakest health unit. If you can get a Guinsu's on her, let her scale, let her do her thing. It also lets you, again, another Aegis here. It lets you want to also splash in team-wide traits. So Altruist is great. Like we talked about, Arcanist is good to get AP for your whole team, which is good for Kale. Sage gives you frontline Omnivamp, backline AP. Ghostly lets your team deal more damage. Of course, we talk about Heavenly. Dragon Lord as well deals team-wide damage and buffs your whole team's attack speed. Since you already have like Zyra, which pairs well with Sage, you have Altruist, which Riven is. And when you throw in, Diana with Sage, Dragon Lord, you have Lee Sin with Dragon Lord Duelist that fits in with Aurelia. You have Rakan, which is a Dragon Lord Altruist, which fits in with Riven. You can just see how all these pieces tie together to strengthen your overall team. And if you have 2 or 3 void spawns, along with all of these Randuins and Aegises, your overall team just becomes so, you just have like an entire army of monsters that just can't be taken down. And in the meantime, you have a backline unit like KL3 or Aurelia that's scaling the amount of damage that they can deal over time. And it's just not fair. You can see here I'm at level 8, 106 gold. And this other guy, Coralus, is complaining that he hit one ZZ Rot. And this is exactly what I'm talking about, where, I walk all over this guy. He's at level 9. And it's just high variance if you're betting that you're going to hit a ZZ Rot when you're in the early game and you commit to that route. Whereas again, Story Weaver is just really safe. You don't have to rely on that. You can actually hit the 7 Story Weaver in the late game without a spat. Of course, it's easier if you have a spat since you get there earlier and that lets you be more stable. Heavenly, you can only get 6 Heavenly unless you get a spat. And so Heavenly again caps out higher, but it's going to be a lot higher variance. So here I would like another Aegis or Randuin's, but again, another needlessly big gem. My team's reasonably tanky, so I'm just going to get massive damage amp once I hit that 15-second timer in the battle. And this is the Bard guy again. He's really close to hitting his 3 stars and cashing his golden egg out. So we'll see, keep an eye on that guy to see how it goes. So I would love Guinsu here, but the other guy takes it. And I'm looking at some type of anti-heal. The other great thing about Storyweaver is that Zyra has built-in wound, but of course that only hits the target that she's attacking. And so I'm thinking, okay, I can convert this Morello into a support item, or I could consider actually using it because you expect these fights to last a really long time. Anti-heal, just make sure they can't heal back up, especially if you can get a user on it that can spread it really well. Like you can put it on Econ. If you have a Morgana, that'd be great. Just anyone that it's AoE that can use it. It just synergizes so well with this strategy. So here I get the Rakan and I'm going to throw that Morello on it. And you can see here, he goes right into the middle and just burning everybody. And meanwhile, Kale's in the back cleaning up the mess. I don't even need the needlessly big gem. It's kind of overkill. Usually you could just have one and that's probably enough. And again, I'm level 9. I'm on a 13 streak with 60 gold. This is like the easiest game I've played of all time. And it's just super fun too. It's relatively stress-free, except for maybe that early game. How you navigate the early game is really, I think, the key to playing this comp. Whether you want to go down the Heavenly route, the Storyweaver route, and whether you get a bunch of ZZ routes early on or not. I've also seen this comp played with Ghostly, 6 Ghostly, but I think the stats just show that's not as great. It's probably, I think, solid top 4. So you can see this guy got the Barb 3 and I just walked over it. I wouldn't say it was like easily walk over, but given that I'm level 10 with 50 gold against that guy, like that was pretty easy. I don't have Azir items. Azir actually would be quite good because you can also just create an army of soldiers. But I'm also just thinking my Kale is going to walk over this stuff anyway. And I'd rather have more Ultras and Dragon Lords. That might have been a mistake. But I also just don't have any items for the Azir. So that's the other thing is towards the end game, you probably want to have an additional carry in addition to Kale. And again, that's the beauty of Kale versus Heavenly, because Heavenly, you would have needed to probably have 3 items to put on your Aurelia or something. But with Kale, you could just keep using support items. So then you don't need to worry, oh, if you find a 2-star Aurelia, or in that case, I found a 2-star Azir, I don't have any items that I can really place on them. And that is why Kale just makes this fine vintage so easy to play. I'm looking for some more healing. Eventually I want to try to find that Aurelia. You get another Randuin. So now that Riven has 3 Randuins. Same thing. I got the Hui, but I don't want to take out the 7-story Weaver since Kalen's really my carry. And the Dragon Lords really round this team out. So I don't really need the Hui, and my this is the Bard guy again. It's looking a lot closer, but I get the huge damage spike, and then I walk over this guy with 4 unit victory. So now I put in Wukong 2. I was like wondering, I wonder if Soraka might actually be better than one of these other frontline units that I'm putting in, just because you get the Heavenly and Altruist. Again, the Heavenly benefits. Heavenly gives with Wukong gives you attack speed and AP if you're talking about Soraka. And yeah, so I take out the Lee Sin, especially since my Aurelia is not fully atomized. It's not 2-star, so I'm not going to get that much damage from there anyway. And so the Soraka just really helps give my team more AR, MR through Ultras, gives me AP and attack speed through Heavenly. And then I put a blue buff on the Wukong. And this is the last game. My opponent was asking me, did I have Fortune or did I just use a normal board here? And I was like, no, this is all fine vintage. So there you go. This is the fine vintage broken augment.